Welcome to my Minnesota Misinformation lecture. For context, at the beginning of this conversation, I made a video in reply to this comment. Someone said that they had explained this to a coworker today, but they retorted with, "But that guy put tampons in the boys' bathroom." You know what we're talking about. So in that video, you commented, "It's a law in Minnesota signed by Governor Putz. Do you need the link?" So I replied to that comment as video and I said, "Sure, send me the link and we'll read it together." You commented on that video, Minnesota HF 44, school district or charter school must provide access to menstrual products at no charge. The products must be available in restrooms used by students in grades 4 through 12. We good. Here's the full context of that conversation, in case you wanted to pause and take a screenshot or something. Now, why did I ask you for that link? That's where we're going to start. I asked you for a link to the text of the law that was signed. The answer is because I was looking for the primary source that you used to come to your conclusion. A primary source is something that gives you direct, first-hand information about an event, person, or time period. Some examples of primary sources include interview transcripts, speeches or letters, and official documents. One kind of official document we can use as a primary source is the text of a law that was passed. But why is this important to think about? A secondary source, on the other hand, is something that takes information from primary sources and explains, analyzes, or interprets it. Think of it like someone telling you what happened after hearing it from someone else. Some examples of secondary sources include books about a historical event. The author was not actually there, so they use primary sources to explain, analyze, and interpret the historical events for you. Another example of a secondary source is a Facebook post about a law that was passed. If the post author explains, analyzes, or interprets that law for you, that's a secondary source. Similarly, a TikTok video about a current event can be a secondary source if the video author is summarizing, explaining, or interpreting a primary source for you. Interestingly though, if TikTok video captures an event that's happening, like someone's filming a protest or a natural disaster or a political rally or something, then the video actually serves as a primary source. In this case, the person's providing a first-hand account of what they're witnessing, which makes the video an original piece of evidence from their perspective. So a primary source is an original piece of evidence, and a secondary source is someone's interpretation or analysis of an original piece of evidence. Given that, why did I ask you for a primary source? Why did I ask you for a link to the law that you were referencing? In this discussion about something that political pundits and energized social media users are talking about, why am I asking you about a primary source? Well, the answer is because primary sources give you the most direct, original evidence about something. Primary sources help you form your own understanding without relying on someone else's interpretation. Someone else's interpretation, especially about something related to politics or on social media, can often lead to biased reporting. It can lead us to biased conclusions. It can generally have us in an incomplete state of understanding. By focusing on primary sources, in this case, the actual text of the law that we're talking about, we can see what the law actually says and then make our own informed conclusions about it. So in other words, primary sources let us get as close as possible to the truth. So let's look at the actual law. The link I was expecting looks something like this. This is a link to Minnesota's Office of the Reviser of Statutes, which is just a fancy title to say that this is where you'll find the official government versions of laws that are being worked on and laws that have already been passed. That's what we're looking for, a law that's been passed. If you click on the laws link right here, it will take you to the Minnesota Sessions Law Index page. Here, you can click on the link to the 93rd legislature, which was in session 2023 to 2024, and that will take you to the 93rd legislature's list of regular sessions. In this case, we're talking about a law that was passed in the 2023 regular session. I know that because the law we're talking about was passed in May of 2023, which would have been before the 2024 session started. So anyway, let's click on the 2023 regular session link, which takes us to a big list of every bill for the 2023 regular session. Now, you mentioned HF 44, which is actually not the bill that was signed into law. The bill that was signed into law is HF 2497. So we want to search for that. That's the omnibus educational bill. Let's go back to this page and let's search for this bill that we want to find. Again, HF 2497. I'm going to make sure my browser is focused by clicking anywhere on the page, and then I'm going to hold down the control key on the keyboard and press the F key while I'm holding the control key, and that's going to bring up the browser's text search box. When I do that, I'm going to type in HF2497. This will automatically show me all of the places on this website where that text can be found. In this case, we're going to find it right there as one of the bills for the May 23rd, 2023 day that this bill was passed. Let's go ahead and click on that link, which takes us to the details page about this bill. It looks like this. We know we're in the right place because we can see the bill's identifier, HF2497, right here. Now, what are we looking for? We want the current text of the bill. And if we look just underneath the identifier we just found, we can see a link right here to something called fifth engrossment. This is just a fancy legislative word for the fifth, and in this case, final version of the bill, after all the bill's amendments and changes have all been accounted for and put into the version of the bill. So we know that this is the current bill text because this is the link next to the label, current bill text. Let's click on that link and it will take us to this page. I like to read the PDF versions of bills because I can add them to my reference manager and then I can add digital notes to them. So I'm going to click on this link right here, PDF, and when I do that, it's going to open up the bill as a PDF. I know this is the actual final bill that was approved by the governor because right here it says 5/24/2023 governor approval. So let's scroll down to the second page where the text that we want to look for is at. It looks like this. The text is small on my screen, but if you're following along, you can read it with me. A school district or charter school must provide students with access to menstrual products at no charge. The products must be available to all menstruating students in restrooms regularly used by students in grades 4 to 12 according to a plan developed by the school district. Now, hang on a second. Is that the information you were working with when you replied with the text of the law? Here's what the law that was signed actually says. And here's the text of the law that you wrote. Let me get my head out of the way. Here's the text of the law that you wrote in your comment. Now that's interesting because it looks like they're not the same. So let's break them down sentence by sentence so that we can see what's different. Here we have A1 and A2, which are the sentences that you shared in a comment, and B1 and B2, which are the sentences that our primary source have, the actual law that was passed. Now let's see if we can find out from the text from the primary source, let's see how it differs from the text that you've provided. Let's compare A1 with B1 first. Okay, so these are a bit different, but the general meanings of the sentences appear to be the same. A school district or a charter school must provide something to students. The condition in which that something must be provided is at no charge, and the something that must be provided is menstrual products. That looks clear enough, so these two sentences seem like they say the same thing. Now let's compare A2 with B2. Here they are together. The subject here is the products. Next we have the predicate of the sentence, must be available. The predicate of a sentence includes the verb and provides information about what the subject is or does. In this case, it indicates the necessity and state of the menstrual products being available. After this, we have in this sentence from your comment, A2, a prepositional phrase, in restrooms by students in grades 4 to 12. The purpose of a prepositional phrase in a sentence is to provide additional information about a noun or verb that adds context and detail and meaning to the sentence. But down here in sentence B2, from our primary source, look where that same prepositional phrase is. That same prepositional phrase, well, there's one, the one in the actual law has one extra word regularly, so virtually the same phrase, but we also have something else hidden in there. To all menstruating students. Interesting. That's very interesting. Now, why is that interesting? Because the actual law that was passed contains an additional prepositional phrase. We don't see that up there in the sentence from your comment. This additional prepositional phrase in the law that was passed specifies the intended recipients of the products. That seems like a really important context that's been left out from wherever you read the text of the law. Remember, prepositional phrases like this provide additional information that adds context, detail, and meaning. If we leave it out, the meaning of the sentence changes. It's no longer clear who the menstrual products are specifically for. This can mislead people into thinking that schools are required to provide menstrual products in all restrooms, including boys' bathrooms. It might make people think that this applies to all students, rather than specifically just to those who need the products. This lack of specificity can be used to create confusion and used to misinform people about the actual law that was passed. Again, why is it important to use primary sources? This is why we want to use primary sources, especially when we're talking about laws and policies. Any number of people could have an agenda wanting to leave out this important prepositional phrase that changes the meaning of the sentence when it's left out. Menstrual products don't need to be available in restrooms used by students. They must be available to all menstruating students in restrooms used by students. Can you see how that one little change alters the meaning of the sentence? If you leave out a part of the sentence that adds context and meaning to the sentence, you get an entirely different sentence. So in summary, we want to use primary sources when we're forming conclusions. If we're talking about a law that was passed, the primary source is the actual text of the law that was passed. Read for yourself the primary sources that someone is talking about. And remember, always come to your own conclusions. In this case, going and looking up the law and actually reading it, rather than relying on some other person, someone other than you, and something other than a primary source of the law that was passed. Coming to your conclusion the way that you did led you to form a conclusion based on the wrong thing. You actually don't have an opinion about this law because you formed your conclusions based off of someone else's misinformation. I want to be clear, though, that's not your fault necessarily. There is so much information out there coming at people so fast that we ought to be able to trust the people who get paid by companies to talk about this stuff. But in today's world, we all have to take great care in making sure that we really think about the kinds of opinions we're forming. And it's especially important that we make sure that we wonder about why we think the things that we do. And most importantly, what primary sources we've read that led us to form our own conclusions. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I sincerely hope that this is helpful. Bye-bye.